But John Lewis, the dude is fierce. Fierce, courageous, and determined.
I saw this wonderful, innocent, saintly young man who was committed to changing the South without violence.
They were in a war, and they were the frontline soldiers in that war.
They were going in the battle to overcome evil with love, to overcome violence with nonviolence.
Literally stood on the front lines for freedom and created real change and helped the United States live up to its Constitution.
Some consider him fierce, courageous, and determined. Some consider him almost saintly. He is a giant in the civil rights movement, and yet some say he's an ordinary person doing extraordinary things. He was devoted to the cause of nonviolence. John Lewis has touched the lives of many people, and now my colleagues and I share his story in a very special way as we pen letters to our own children.
To my dynamic daughters, my heart bursts with pride at the young ladies you are today and the young women you will become.
It may be hard for you to believe, but things you do without a second thought were still taboo even 50 years ago.
I know we have spent many hours talking about the civil rights movement and its importance to African American history. I was a kid back in the 60s, and I watched the civil rights movement through the eyes of a child even younger than you are now.
The longevity of the freedoms afforded us are in direct proportion to our willingness not to give up, not to give out, and not to give in. That's the mantra by which Congressman John Lewis has lived.
One of the true trailblazers was instrumental in organizing student sit-ins with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, also known as SNCC. He also organized bus boycotts and several nonviolent protests with Dr. King.
He is the only person still living who spoke on the program on August 23, 1963, during the historic March on Washington, in which Dr. King gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech.
He also led over 600 marchers across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, which became known as Bloody Sunday because while praying, they were attacked and beaten.
The freedoms our ancestors fought and died for cannot be wasted. So Candace, I urge you, don't forget the sacrifices made that got you where you are right now.
We can thank people like John Lewis for leaving the footsteps that the world can follow.
Just going to show my face so I won't be in trouble.
More one.
How long ago did they call? Good to see you, brother. Hi. You know Brenda.
The pace of his days on Capitol Hill.
In one evening, I went to like 7 receptions.
Gives no hint of his 70 years.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, you're going up, I'm going down.
We've come on a Wednesday, usually a very busy day on the Hill, but especially today. It's the start of a new congressional session.
Welcome.
Congressman John Lewis started this day at 7 a.m.
The debate for Ways and Means.
Today, the House will vote on health care.
Oh, Ways and Means.
And between committee meetings and his scheduled late afternoon speech on the House floor,
The repeal before senior to pay.
wherever he goes, he's greeted with hero status
How you doing?
by Democrats
Fine.
With the UAW.
and Republicans
Yes, how you doing?
and plain ordinary people.
You are a hero of this nation.
John Lewis is a living legend, one of the architects of a desegregated America, alongside Dr. Martin Luther King, whom he wishes could still give him guidance.
Even sometimes when I'm sitting on the floor of the House, maybe I'm going to speak, maybe I'm going to say something. I said to myself, I wonder what would Dr. King do? I wonder what would Dr. King say?
Private thoughts about the great man who changed Lewis's life and put him, too, on the path of greatness.
I had been hurt, so I had a patch on my head.
President Obama will honor John Lewis with the Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor a president can give.
It is a great honor.
He was told a few months ago.
And I said, Mr. President, you need to stop. you keep on talking, you're going to make me cry. And he sort of said, go ahead and cry.
And you did?
I did.
Recognition of his work, conducted in the streets of Nashville and Montgomery, Birmingham and Selma back in the 60s. Work with Dr. King that paved the way for such an honor to be bestowed by the nation's first black president.
What will that feel like to get the award from him?
It's just going to be unreal, unbelievable. And we do my very best to stand there without shedding a tear.
Yeah, right. Have you thought about what you'll say?
I will be accepting it on behalf of not just myself, but countless individuals that have stood in those unmovable lines in Selma trying to register to vote.
For those who sat at lunch counters and went on freedom rides 50 years ago, and for those beaten, even murdered for the sake of equality.
It says something about the distance that I've come.
It says something about a power greater than himself and a destiny he had to live.
From the Jim Crow days of Troy, Alabama, to the halls of Congress, to the Presidential Medal of Freedom, Congressman John Lewis's life journey is nothing short of a purposed miracle.
We're gonna walk together.
When I heard the words of Dr. King on old radio, it seemed like he was saying, you too, John Lewis, can do something.
And he started a journey not for the faint of heart.
Does it ever cross your mind, wow, how did I have the nerve?
Well, every so often, it sort of said, why? How did you sit on those lunch counter stools and let someone spit on you or put a lighted cigarette out in your hair? How do you stay there and let someone pull you off of the stool and beat you? But that's by the grace of God.
It wasn't until he got arrested that his mother finally learned he'd joined the civil rights movement.
So she wrote me a letter, and my middle name is Robert. She said, Dear Robert, you went off to school to get an education. You need to get out of this mess before you get hurt.
He didn't listen. Leading a march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma proved a mother's intuition true.
I have a scar right here and one in the top of my head. If you feel right there, just a little dent.
Yeah.
Lewis never imagined violence that day. He just thought he'd be carted off to jail.
I was wearing a backpack, and in this backpack I had 2 books, an apple, an orange, toothpaste, and toothbrush. This is the first meeting to plan the March on Washington. This is the so-called Big Six.
On the left, a 23-year-old John Lewis, who would be the youngest speaker on one of the nation's most historic days. He still remembers his speech.
So you tell us to wait. You tell us to be patient. We cannot wait. We cannot be patient. We want our freedom, and we want it now.
Not just the youngest, though. His prepared text proved he was also the most radical speaker that day.
I said something like, if we do not see any meaningful progress here today, the day may come when we will be forced to march through the South, the way Sherman did, non-violently.
He never got to say that. The Archbishop threatened not to give the invocation if he did, and Dr. King asked Lewis to take it out.
Are you as radical now as you were then?
Well, I still stand up and still demand that we need to do more.
Haven't mellowed?
No, I don't think I mellowed at all.
Of the big 6 leaders of the civil rights movement, John Lewis is considered the most courageous the movement has ever produced. He's also the only one of the 6 still living.
And still serving, now 13 terms in Congress.
You never know where what I call the spirit of history is going to lead you. A lot of times we come out here.
The man who so defiantly challenged the nation years ago is now part of this nation's establishment, with a reminder every day just outside his office window.
I understand that you really love poetry.
Well, I love poetry. I love music.
A humble man whose work helped change a nation.
Favorite music? Kind of music?
Gospel. I love gospel music.
A national treasure, still in the fight for justice and equality.
Favorite song, favorite artist?
Well, one of my favorite songs is gospel song is Order My Steps. order my steps.
Perhaps because it seems something beyond himself has indeed ordered his steps.
What memory of your life would you want to relive?
Maybe, just maybe, when we were walking between Selma and Montgomery with Dr. King. The sun was shining, and we were just walking, talking. And every now and then someone would sing a song. It was like a holy march. I felt like God Almighty was walking with us.
Thank you.
I'm kind of excited, kind of nervous, because I'm meeting somebody that's really important.
You have an opportunity most children can only dream about.
That's amazing. This is a church where Dr. King actually preached.
Well, we're getting ready to talk to Congressman Lewis.
As you sit face to face with this living legend, I pray that you appreciate what he did to make today possible for all of us.
I'm kind of excited, kind of nervous, because I'm meeting somebody that's really important, and I'm looking forward to meeting him today.
Today you'll have a rare opportunity to meet this giant, who at times risked his own life for so many. I pray his words will inspire and motivate you to continue in the spirit of selflessness to better your community and make a difference in the world.
I've heard very little about him.
The stories of the struggle will be held as sacred as a family heirloom, and that's why I share them with you now.
I've been waiting for this a long time.
Thank you.
Sometimes I think we take the civil rights movement of old for granted, but it didn't just happen.
The future holds endless potential for each of you, thanks to men like Congressman Lewis. Don't ever forget the shoulders on which you stand.
How you doing? Fine, good to see you. Good to meet you. Hi, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
One day, many years from now, you will say with great pride, I met Congressman John Lewis, and you will say it the same way you would say, I met the president.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. I hope you never forget the sacrifices made so that you don't experience the hatred and the racism that nearly claimed his life and the lives of so many others.
I think it's important to tell the stories and to tell the stories over and over again. It's important for our children to know the distance, the progress we've made.
What was it like for you when you were my age? I'm 16. What was it like for you going through the segregation and all that stuff for you during the time period?
I grew up in rural Alabama. When I was 16, I saw those signs that said white men, white waiting, colored waiting. As a young child, I was bused long distance to get to an all-blank school. I never attended an integrated school or a desegregated school. It was all black. So I would ask my mother, ask my father, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, why segregation? Why racial discrimination? And they would almost say like, boy, don't be asking questions like that. Don't you get in trouble. Don't you get in the way. But Dr. King and Rosa Parks and others inspired me to get in trouble, to get in the way. And I've been getting in the way and getting in trouble ever since. At the age of 16, with some of my brothers and sisters and first cousins, we went down to the public library in the little town of Troy, Alabama, trying to get library cards, trying to check out some books. And we were told by the librarian that the library was for whites only and not for colors.
Tell me, when you look at this picture, how do you feel?
When I look at that picture, I feel like we're standing at a point of no return. We could not turn back. So we had been planted there by some force, maybe by history itself, but we couldn't turn back. We had to do it. Because people in Selma, Alabama, in other parts of the state, other parts of the American South, could not register to vote simply because of the color of their skin. When we were marching from Selma to Montgomery and we crossed the bridge, I was walking beside a young man by the name of Jose Williams. And as we walked to the highest point on that bridge, down below we saw a sea of blue, Alabama State Troopers. And we kept walking. We came within a hearing distance of the State Troopers. and a man said, this is an unlawful march.
You have to disperse, your orders to disperse, go home or go to your church. This march will not continue.
And Jose said, Major, give us a moment to kneel and pray. And the major said, troopers, advance. They started pushing us and beating us. I was hit in the head by a state trooper with a nightstick and was knocked down and left unconscious. All these years later, I don't recall, I made it back across that bridge, through the streets of Selma, back to that little church. But I do recall being back at the church. I think someone probably literally carried me back to the church. And they asked me to say something to the audience. There were more than 2,000 people on the outside trying to get in. The church was full. And I stood up and said something like, I don't understand it. How President Johnson can send troops to Vietnam, but cannot send troops to Selma, Alabama, to protect people who only desires to register to vote. The next thing I knew, I'd been admitted to a local hospital in Selma.
Were you ever afraid of what was ahead?
No, I was never afraid, because we're trained to not be afraid and to move on in spite of what could happen to any one of us. I knew when I was sitting in or going on a freedom ride that I could be beaten, I could be killed, but I felt, and I think we all felt, that our cause was so right and so necessary that we have to move on in spite of it all.
How hard was it for you guys to uphold that nonviolence thing? Because I know it was me, personally, I probably wouldn't have been into that nonviolence thing.
Well,
How hard was that?
Well, if you had studied the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence, we had role playing, we had social drama, we studied, we prepared ourselves before going on a sit-in, before participating in a march. We became disciplined. We became believers in the philosophy of nonviolence. And when someone would spit on us, or pour hot water, hot coffee, or hot chocolate on us, or maybe try to put a cigarette out in our hair or down our back, we tried to take it. And we didn't strike back. That's what Gandhi taught us. Because we studied Gandhi, we studied what he attempted to do in South Africa, what he accomplished in India. We studied what Dr. King was doing in Montgomery. So many of us grew to accept nonviolence, not simply as a technique or as a tactic, but as a way of life, as a way of living.
You're a very brave man.
Well, I'm not sure whether I was brave or not. I just tried to do what I thought was right and tried to be part of an effort to make our country different and make it possible for all of our citizens to become registered voters.
May I have a hug?
Yes, yes, for me. Thank you so much.
What would you charge my generation to do in 2011 and as we go forward? What would you charge my generation to do in 2011 and as we go forward?
I think it's important for your generation and for all of us to do our part to try to encourage and get people to become participants in the democratic process. In another time, not that many years ago, people were asked things like, how many bubbles in a bar of soap? How many jelly beans in a jar? People are not going to be asked that today. People won't be beaten in jail for participating. So we got to continue to get people to participate. Every vote will count and must count.
Bullying is a big problem right now in schools today. What do you think kids should do to stop the bullying nonviolently?
Bullying is a big problem. It's a major problem. We got to teach all young people the way of peace, the way of love, the way of nonviolence. Dr. King said on one occasion that we must learn to live together as brothers and sisters, or we will perish as fools.
Most of my school is predominantly white students. I think we have a pretty good cultural mix in there. What is that like for you to see that today?
When I was growing up, I didn't see that. I wanted to attend a little college when I graduated from high school, only 10 miles from my home, called Troy State College then. It's known as Troy University now. It didn't admit me because I was black. I go back to the same school now to speak to the black and white students there. And they gave me an honorary degree. So I tell the students at Troy University, I got my education the easy way from Troy University.
That's funny.
When I see and visit integrated school, it is very moving to me because it said that we've come a distance. We made a lot of progress. I wish Dr. King was still here to see it, that his dream is becoming real. Sometimes I cry tears of joy and happiness to know the distance we've come, the progress that we've made. I feel more than lucky. I feel very blessed.
Dear Congressman Lewis, it was such an honor to meet you in person. I was also glad that we had a chance as teens to talk to you on issues about racism, bullying, and all types of discrimination.
I'll never forget the time he gave me a hug and we walked together to the tomb of Martin Luther King Jr. and his wife, Coretta Scott King.
Meeting with you has been a life-changing experience. You've given me so much perspective on the struggles that you had to endure, as well as the other civil rights leaders.
One thing that stood out to me was the fact that everyone in the nonviolent civil rights movement was trained to be nonviolent and actually succeeded in not retaliating.
You are an amazing man. You are definitely one of the strongest people I know. Without you, my life would have been totally different. Respectfully, Tyler.